Hello and welcome to Buying and Beyond, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of retail buying. We're Kate and Linz and together we have over 30 years experience in retail.
We'll be talking all things retail buying and beyond, so grab your drink of choice and come and have a giggle with us. Hi.
Welcome back for episode 2 of season 2.
2-2.
So what are we going to talk about today?
So I'm really excited about this episode. Not that I'm not excited about them all, but it's one of my favourite things to talk about. So in this week's episode, we are going abroad.
Woo!
The excitement of your first trip. We have so much to talk about. It's a subject that we have split into multiple parts, and I'm sure we'll circle back in later episodes too. But today, we'll focus specifically on product development trips and visiting factories, which is mostly relevant for own brand buyers.
Yes.
Lots to talk about.
So one of my favourite things about development trips, and in particular your first trip, is understanding the manufacturing process. So the number of people involved in creating one product, like seeing your products created en masse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, like one trip, I remember I visited an enamel Christmas decoration factory and the designs were being hand painted on.
Wow.
Like there was so much intricate detail and like so much skill that I don't think I'd properly appreciated.
Yeah, I think that is like, that's the main thing for me on my first trip was, wow, all the processes that go into this is insane. Like for the price.
And when things are being hand woven.
Yeah. So yeah, on outdoor furniture, how quickly they weave those chairs, and quite often they're being paid per chair as well in the factories. So, they're trying to get it done as quickly as possible, but obviously adhering to the technical.
And you've got the QC sat at the end.
Yeah.
It's similar to order raising in a way, although it's a lot more skilled. But it is that you need to do it quickly, efficiently, but also you need to make sure that it's pretty exact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I also remember going to a shoe factory and seeing the sole gluing machines, and I don't think I'd quite understood, like, the number of times like it passes through depends on how much you pay for the product.
Mm-hmm,
so say like they were explaining to me like a Primark shoe might go through once or twice, but a Nine West shoe, for example, because they produce both in these factories, and that's also something I don't think you always understand is actually
the multiple brands
that are being used in the same production line. But the Nine West shoe, for example, was going through 10 times. So
interesting.
The kind of the quality of that product was a lot stronger. So you could see why you were paying more.
Yeah.
But you don't always notice that until you go.
And also the speed of something. So there's lots of products that take a lot more time and processes to produce versus something that's quite mass produced. So it's really interesting to see both processes. So for example, a PVC Christmas tree is really, really quite quick and easy to manufacture because they're just using a really, really long piece of PVC that's spun and then they're cut. That's your branch. Whereas a tree that has a injection molded branch, they've got to go through that whole process of injection molding and then getting the branch out and then winding it onto something. So I know it sounds really, really obvious, but you just as a consumer, you just don't think about it.
And even creating that mould has a cost to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's yet another process before you can even start.
So you really understand when they're like, well, that's going to be $50 more because you've got to pay for the mould. When you're back in the UK and you've never been on a trip and you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah. It really helps, doesn't it? It really emphasises how important it is to understand like your product from raw material to end use. And often that knowledge can mean that you're able to negotiate without just putting the pressure on.
Yeah,
which is, to be honest, a bit of a lazy negotiation tactic. But, we can go through those at another point. But, some of those kind of processes can be one of the first things to go, like the amount of plating on a jewellery. Because your red seal sample will look exactly like your original sample.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, when the customer buys it, how long until their finger goes green?
Yeah. And that's not good for the brand.
Yeah, so it's really important to have that awareness. Like, you can put
And
the
that
parameters
knowledge,
around negotiation. You can put really clear requirements on your design briefs.
Yeah.
But also another one, let's touch on it really quickly. It's also really good to do some wearer trials. I loved wearer trials. I used to jump at the opportunity for a wearer trial.
So for the audience that might be like, what is a wearer trial? What's a wearer trial, Kate?
I mean, it is what it says on the tin. You trial wearing something to see the quality of a product. So it would be something that like quality control would do. So your tech team would be doing just to see the lifespan of a product.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, it's similar to, so if you had a garment, maybe you do kind of like, your tech would probably wash it and they would do a pull test on it.
Yeah.
And you'd just check that the fabric is lasting on a bag. You'd make sure that the clasp worked.
Yeah.
Someone might have it for a week or two.
Yeah,
you know,
or like a purse, the credit cards actually fit in. I remember doing that when I was a BMA. It was one of the like many tasks you had to do to check a production sample. Does the card fit in the wallet? Like, it's so obvious.
It's so obvious, but you need to check
sometimes,
these
like,
things.
if certain factories are trying to if certain factories have been squeezed on price, that might be what they've done. They've altered the specification to get into that price, and then that's when you can go back and go, no, we haven't discussed this, and the card no longer fits in the purse.
Yeah.
I cannot market this as a purse.
Yeah, you've shaved a bit off my cost price, but now the product is absolutely useless and you can't use it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I also remember this time that one of my technologists was like, can you try this necklace on? And it had quite a lot of chains on it. And
yes, love that. I've just been selected for this. Cherry picked.
Then I got home and I moved it to one side and I'd come out in this massive rash. I mean, I do have very sensitive skin, so it might just be my sensitive soul. But I remember sending a picture straight away to my technologist and she was like, get that necklace off.
Oh,
no.
yeah. So that just shows ultimate reasons. Imagine if you had like 100 customers or so, like wandering around with these rashy necks. Ugh. Imagine the impact on your business. But you can't wear a trial everything, because it is a bit like sampling. Like, it would just really impact your cost price. So you do have to like back a product, go with your gut, and then just select certain key lines that you want to wear a trial. I actually also used to find that it was quite telling sometimes, because it's not just a QC piece, but sometimes it was just do people even like it? Like, if an email went round being like, can I have someone to wear, I need 3 people to wear a trial this product. And then it came round again that evening. And then the next day, I've still got 3 bags to wear a trial. You're like, okay, like, if
someone take it, please.
If no one in the office wants to wear a trial, and that's literally just for a week, maybe you're not going to have the customers.
Not the right product.
maybe you'll have no customers and no sales either.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We always used to say, if a product was like really hard work from development to production, then it was always going to be one of those ones that didn't sell. I don't know why. It was just like tainted from the beginning.
Just give up on it. I thought you were going to say the opposite, like it was really hard work, then be a bestseller, but then to try and get it back into a repeat would just be such a long production time or something. You'd be like, oh my God, it was difficult, it was tricky, we only backed a small amount, it's gone wild, I now need to get more in, and I can't get it in because
that's more rewarding, isn't it, than the dog that it ends up being. True. And the pain you've been through to get it into the store and ends up being like that.
But I guess you still got that, like, that balance of that frustration of like, you're just going to be out of stock of it for a few weeks because you didn't back it enough because it was so difficult to produce. Swings and roundabouts. I mean, it's constant, isn't it? Right product, right place, right time.
Absolutely.
It's the never-ending challenge. The other thing about trips can also be like the opportunity for like building those relationships. Like, there is nothing better than a face-to-face meeting to supercharge your rapport, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you
need to shake their hands, you need to look them in the eye, and they need to see that you're a person, Yeah,
because it really helps to put like a face to a name. But, so often you've had many a VC or a Zoom conversations with your suppliers. So you've kind of done that bit, but you don't really know each other. Yeah. And it's so hard to read body language over a camera. Like, that's definitely something we've learned since pandemic, isn't it? We know that just from like, you know, one-to-ones with people. Like, you don't really get to know somebody properly. Like, there's nothing better than actually being together in a room.
Yeah. And just being in a showroom, and, you know, there's so many more opportunities when you get out there that you don't realise sometimes that factory is actually working with so many different markets in the world, and they might be doing, one of those markets might be doing something that's actually really right for your customer. So you can learn from them, jump off the back of the production run, you know.
You can find that they're doing product areas that you had no idea that they even had the capabilities, because you've never asked.
No.
But they've never offered.
The camera's never panned out.
And particularly if you've like, maybe they've been a supplier that you as a business have been working with for a long time, and you've just inherited them from, you've joined the team, these are the suppliers we work with, these are their capabilities, go.
Yeah.
You've not necessarily, and maybe when you meet them, you might be like, okay, so give me a bit of a rundown on like who you are, what you do. But they've been working with you for so long, they're used to doing a certain product with you, and they don't even think to tell you about the other things that they do out the back for so-and-so.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not until you get there that you're like, oh my God, this is great. I love this.
What are you doing for Crate and Barrel? My God, I didn't know you were supplying Crate and Barrel. One of my favourite retailers, Crate and Barrel. Beautiful product.
Name drop. So one thing we mentioned is about like getting to know your product end to end. You learn so much about those raw materials and the supply chain and their capabilities, as we've said, but then also understanding their production schedules first hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you go, especially when you go to a Chinese factory for the first time, you realise how efficient they are. Like, it's insane to think of how they've come up with this process just to make a product, you know, and they are thinking about every single stage and how to make it in the most quickest, efficient way with adhering to the quality that they need to adhere to. And it's just really fascinating to walk around a factory and see that, you know, and really good factory manager is all about efficiency, quality and speed. And it's fascinating to see. It's just fascinating to see. When I first went to a Chinese factory, I was just absolutely amazed at the efficiency of the factory. Like, you know, they really do try and work out the quickest, most, you know, efficient, most adhering to the quality process to make that item. And it's just, you know, a really good factory manager has just got such an amazing brain to come up with those processes. And walking around and say, you know, I know it sounds really obvious, like just seeing the different stages and just seeing like how that all pulls together. It's quite fascinating.
It is. You've got to have a real understanding. You need to be an expert of the product to be able to make sure that you have got all of those things and the timing working so well and the right number of people working at the right point so that you can have like the maximum output. I always found it quite interesting. Actually, not just the factory differences and kind of the processes, although that's definitely one of them, but also partly negotiation too, which I'm sure we'll touch on, is the differences often between different cultures. And the Chinese and the Taiwanese I always found super like just slick.
Yeah.
And prices were always very like everything was very carefully calculated.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds quite like stereotypical, but generally everything was just very, very carefully calculated.
No wastage or hardly any wastage.
Yeah, like keeping things to a minimum. And then I remember working with some sort of like Indian suppliers where it was much more creative. Yeah. Ways around things.
Yeah, that's
and
so
like,
true.
You know, they come up with I don't know, the way sometimes you negotiated would sometimes be a lot more emotive.
Yeah.
And some of the processes as well with the manufacture. Yeah. It wasn't quite as, you know, we follow steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and out the door. It would be like, well, we do 1, 2, and then we might do 3, but sometimes we might do 4. Yeah. Or, but if 4 is busy, we could do 5, and then we'll go back and do 3.
It's a lot more handcraft, isn't it?
Because it was so much more handcraft, you could, you know, it wasn't quite so automated.
Yeah.
But it was really funny because you could definitely
there was such a difference in the processes. Although I would say that having recently been out to India, I think that they're becoming a lot more that way, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more process driven. I think just because they can see the opportunity that they now have, like from a manufacturing point of view. So,
and there is a lot more things becoming much more efficient and mass produced, and maybe a little bit less focused on some of the handcrafts.
Yeah, which is a little bit sad in some senses.
Yeah, or they're just finding efficiencies to improve the handcraft.
Yeah. And it's the same with Vietnam. Vietnam's changed so much over the last 5-10 years. They've really gone exactly the same way. They've seen the opportunity of taking some of that business and put more thought and investment into their infrastructure and their ways of working in their factories. Definitely seen that over the last few years.
And the more you can go out and visit them, and the more inquisitive you can be, the more you can find out about these processes and the improvements that they're putting in place, and also like understanding maybe a bit of their kind of their
culture, their cultural influences. I'm just putting words in your mouth here.
Yeah, that wasn't where I was going, but I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
No, I was going to go down with like understanding who their suppliers are and
their raw materials.
And
where are they coming from?
Who are they working with? But also it's also a close-knit community in a lot of these areas, and maybe they don't do a product area, but you're keen for it. Actually, they might be able to recommend. They might know somebody, might be their brother, uncle, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Being very stereotypical there, but we did have a buyer.
It's very family.
It's very family.
Not most, but like quite a lot of the factories and suppliers we work with, it is a family game.
And we did have a buyer who's had, her auntie was one of our suppliers, and her uncle on the other side of the family was another supplier. Yeah. So, we're not being very, there are case studies to prove our kind of stereotyping.
I think what's interesting as well from my most recent trip is that lots of factory owners are finding that their children now are wanting to go and live abroad and not run the factories, which is really interesting. So a lot of factory owners are investing in machinery rather than handing it down to their family. So because they know they need to try and like make this factory more efficient and
modernize
it, because it's not just going to be passed on now. And what I'm trying to say is I think that they're a lot more open-minded and a lot more aware that things might not be like they used to be, and then I think it's the same for our society as well, isn't it? People are going off on a tangent here. Not everybody goes off and has kids these days, and there's like multiple opportunities out there for everybody. So I think it's interesting to see that out there as well.
Mm-hmm. Global multi-hyphen businesses. Yeah, while you're being inquisitive, and you can find out so much about them, and as you said, it gives you the opportunity to go through their showrooms and sort of see all the samples that they may not have shown you that they're doing for other people. And while you're doing that, it is great actually to do some range building.
Yeah.
While you're over there, it is great to do your range building, and it can be really good that if you plan it into your critical path at a point where you've just done your first round of sampling, and then you've sent out your design briefs and you travel to the factories and you can see the sample development sort of firsthand, the first samples that are coming off, and then you can see how they've turned out, particularly if it's a new factory you've not really used before, rather than them sending in 12 boxes of samples that you're just like, no, they completely got that wrong. You can see it while you're there, first one's coming off, and you can save all of that. You can make the changes that you want to make. If it is that it's a new product category or a new product area for either you or them, and you've set a target price in your design brief, but actually they can't make it into that price, or they've made it into that price and it's not what you want, you can actually spend some time price negotiating. And especially when you've seen the end-to-end process and you understand, you can talk through the production and start to say, okay, well, if I need to get it down to this price, what do we need to take off of it?
Like, and quite often it's a collaborative conversation. So you're there with the person that's running your account, but then they're chatting to the factory manager to ask about the production process, to say, actually, Katie wants another $50 off. What can we do to do this? And then he'll go away or she'll go away and grab the factory manager, and then they'll talk through the process. And it's just life-changing process.
Yeah, and it can just make things so much
emails back and forth,
so much quicker, so much more efficient. Not filling it up, and you just get straight to the point and understand what you want. And you don't always have to, like on your trips. Sometimes it can be quite hard. We'll go through trips in a lot more detail in terms of like planning them.
Yeah.
But it can be really hard in terms of your efficiencies to kind of work out who you're seeing and when, and the amount of time, because China's huge. Say you're going to China, huge. India is huge.
Yeah.
Or even if you're going out to see Europe suppliers, like you're flying from one place to another, how do you make that work for you in the kind of most efficient way?
Yeah, absolutely.
And often,
I think when you take on a category that you don't know that much about, and there's not really anyone there to teach you, it's also just what regions are the right regions to be reaching out to. Like where should I be buying glass from? Where should I be buying textiles from? Like, you know, it's a real fact-finding mission, isn't it? You know, and you learn so much from doing that as well. And I think I took on a category from scratch at one point and had exactly that scenario. Didn't have really anybody there that had any knowledge, and was so reliant on a lot of importers. But at the same time, my background in Far East, knowing that, you know, what you needed to do from a process point of view to get the answers. It's such an amazing journey, and you learn so much as a buyer, as a product development buyer, when you're going out there on that fact-finding mission. But one thing I would say is make it quick. Don't you spread your research too far, you know, because you can tie yourself up in knots.
Yeah, and you don't have to go into China. You can get the suppliers to come into Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. You can set up showrooms. You can rent rooms out in a hotel. You could do speed dating of supplier appointments as well. Yeah. Get them all to come in. You just spend one day, book out a couple of meeting rooms. I remember that
in one of the retailers we used to work for.
Or you could even do them in Europe. Meet halfway. Meet in Germany. It's not quite halfway. It's a bit further for them, but
a lot of Chinese factories do that. They hire showrooms in Europe for you to come over to, or the European trade shows like Spoga, Christmas World. You often find factory halls now at these trade shows, which is fantastic. So you don't always have to go out to Canton Fair, which is a minefield in itself. I remember on one of my exploratory trips of where should I buy a certain product range from in China, I was taken to probably about 11 factories in one day, and at one point it was dark. And I was viewing egg chairs in a car park. I was like, enough's enough. I just don't think that viewing egg chairs in a car park's for me, really. And also, not sure I want to be working with a factory that's showing me egg chairs in a car park.
I love that though. Like, there is an element of range building that you can do overseas. Like, you can see the sampling, but also when you can get excited about like seeing what there is and putting it all out. Yeah. But I think we've mentioned this before about you're probably delirious by that point. You might be like, I'll take them all the egg chairs, and then you'll get back and be like, oh good God, you talk about like sampling new and exciting samples that you've seen, but actually you're on day 10 of your trip, and like as we've said before, there's a reason that you've not seen them before anywhere, because that is not a good product.
No, I know. I love that. That's normally about 3 p.m. for me in the afternoon. I'll find something in a showroom and I'll be like, this is amazing. And my technologist usually turns up his nose and he's like, are you sure,
just put it back.
He's the voice of commercial reason. And then, I'll get back to the office and it'll appear on a quote sheet and I'll be like, what the was I
Who
thinking?
put that on
there? What was I thinking?
Oh, God.
Too much full fat Coke.
Time for some retail therapy.
Okay, I think I've got a good one here, Kate.
I'm excited.
Okay. I had just boarded the last flight out of Hong Kong. Bloody love that flight. And settled in for an 11-hour flight home after a 10-day trip. Beyond excited to be getting back. It seemed to be taking forever for the doors to close and be on our way to London Heathrow. Finally, after what seemed like hours, 2 paramedics boarded and headed towards the pilots, and shortly took one off on a stretcher.
Oh, no!
Oh, my gosh.
It's the last thing you want to see.
No, my God. Yeah, definitely. Can you imagine if that happened in the air? Blimey. An announcement was then made that the pilot had food poisoning and therefore the flight tonight was cancelled. That is the worst feeling ever after a long trip.
You just want to get home.
I know. We all began disembarking the flight to chaos in the terminal. We were put on a bus after a very, very long wait with hundreds of other passengers and taken to a hotel where we had to queue for an hour to be checked in. And it's like probably like 1 a.m, 2 a.m.
Gosh.
Myself, my designer and technologist get to the front desk to find out they only had one room left. This is just a nightmare. So we bunked down together, tech on the sofa and designer, who was very fierce, and I sharing the bed. She automatically went into mum mode and asked if I wanted some lavender pillow spray to help me sleep. Lol. In the morning, we were all hauled back onto the coaches and taken to the airport on the first flight out. To make things worse, safely back in business class, we heard that all the other business passengers had been taken to a 5-star hotel and had been up all night partying to a live band and many margaritas.
Oh my God, how did they miss that cue?
And so they would have been passed out the whole way home, and it probably would have just been like an experience rather than a trauma.
Oh, I feel for them.
I know. Terrible.
At least they were safely back in business class.
Yeah.
Well, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from all that information. I mean, not as tired as after a development trip. Travelling can be such an amazing experience. You can go back so full of ideas and expertise in your product category. So we would really encourage you to put the following into action during your product development trips.
Number 1, understanding the manufacturing process of a product is invaluable. You see the end-to-end process, the intricacies, and then also the pain points. It will help you to make improvements to your product and also assist you in your negotiations to ensure your product remains a good quality and value for money. Number 2, ask questions and be inquisitive. You often find you uncover new product capabilities and you'll supercharge your knowledge of the product area, seeing the manufacturing process firsthand. Become that expert. Number 3, spending time with your suppliers and having face-to-face meetings can really improve your relationship and your communications. It's much easier to share and explain in person.
So join us next week for more talk of trips. We're going to cover the more personal aspects of travelling, the fun of new experiences, but also the exhaustion of keeping up with that BAU at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Time difference.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, please, please, please like and subscribe and leave a review.
And if you already have, thank you, thank you, thank you. We all need a bit of retail therapy. And this is the perfect time for you to offload about that super cringeworthy story. We would love to hear from you all, your funny stories and experiences, or even any dilemmas. And maybe we can help, or at least find someone who can. And don't worry, we will keep these anonymous and remove any names and brands.
We would also love to hear from you on any topics you would like us to talk about. Please send all of these into buyingandbeyond@gmail.com or drop us a DM via our Instagram page @buyingandbeyond. Kate, are you a drama queen?
No,
Drama just makes things interesting.
that's true.
All these thoughts and opinions are our own and based on our own experiences working for a wide variety of retailers. These are all in the hope to entertain and educate, and not to reflect negatively on any place we currently or have previously worked.